Hello and welcome to Common Sense Matters, a podcast from a red county, Franklin, and a red state, Tennessee, with a supermajority Republican legislature that lacks, common sense. That's why we discuss fact-based opinions and testimony instead of the misinformation our elected officials and sometimes the media tells us. And we have some perfect examples of that. I am talking today with Victoria Broderick, candidate for U.S. Congress in District 4, which is in Middle Tennessee. Welcome, Victoria. Thanks for sharing this little booth with me at the Franklin County Public Library in Winchester. So tell us about yourself, your demographics, and give us your stump speech.
Hi, I'm Victoria Broderick, and I'm running for Congress in District 4. I'm a mother of two with 4 fur babies, and yes, you heard that right, 4 little fur babies. I am a customer service or customer support professional, and I'm running for Congress because I'm afraid for our democracy.
What town do you live in?
I live in Fayetteville, Tennessee.
Okay, which is in Lincoln.
Lincoln County.
Okay,
Yeah,
good for you. And you've been the chairman of the party there.
Yes. About 2 years ago, I became county chair. It was right after Roe was overturned. The previous county chair had stepped down. And I decided that I wanted to step up to the plate and, do more. So I started working on TikTok and making TikToks as the friendly neighborhood liberal. And then I decided that I was going to run for office in February of 2024 when I found out my opponent was going to run unopposed.
Tell us about your priorities, your issues that you're concentrating on.
So right now I'm concentrating on responsible gun ownership and gun reform. As a gun-owning family, I believe that we are the ones who need to be leading the effort to end our gun violence in our country. We can't just pass the buck anymore. It is time for us to step up to the plate. My next is I want to protect our public education. Public education is so vital to the United States and to our constituents, and I believe it should be safe and that our children deserve decent and equitable schools. Yes. And then last and certainly not least, I am a reproductive freedom candidate. We've talked a lot about reproductive rights. We've talked a lot about abortion, and that seems to be where they all fall around, which I do believe abortion is health care, and I trust doctors and patients to make the best decisions for their lives. But I also believe that it should be more than that. It should be paid paternity and maternity leave. It should be our daycares being well-funded and affordable. It should be paid mandatory vacations because you deserve time off with your families. It's paid sick leave and having a mandatory at least 10 days so you're not using your PTO just to stay home with a sick kid or just stay home in general. Mm-hmm. I want to see our United States represent everyone and be equitable, and right now it doesn't really do that. So
your priorities are very grassroots, and I want you to talk throughout this podcast about the people that you've talked to about these things and what's bothering them.
I should add here, I'm a working class person and I work full time and I'm running a campaign and I have all the tiny humans. I even have a foster kitten right now. I really feel like I represent the working class people, and that's something that is refreshing when I go out and talk to constituents. They love that. It's a jarring, obviously, because they're like, how do you manage? But it's important that we have people that properly represent.
And I noticed in your Ballotpedia survey, which Republicans just do not take. They just don't take it. But you have even in there, like, what's your favorite book?
Yeah, Pride and Prejudice.
It's so Pride and Prejudice. And I don't know your song.
Oh, my favorite song is Sunday Morning by Maroon 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think it had Bluey on there, and I thought that was a cartoon.
Oh, I should say that my 4-year-old and 2-year-old, they are obsessed with Bluey, and so it plays rent-free in my head.
Okay. Maybe that was the question you were answering, what goes on in your head all the time. So these are big topics in Tennessee and many, many states this year. You'd like to work with them on a national level, correct? Okay, well, let's take a look at your opponent, Representative Scott Desjardins. So he's been in Congress since 2010. 13 years. So you believe in term limits, don't you?
I do. I think that we need to be better about passing it off. I think Joe Biden said it the best. Is like, we need to hand the torch and the torch over to the next generation. And I believe in that.
Yes. And it sounds like we need that fresh outlook every
so often.
You don't want to say how many years. I'm going to say I'm going to say maybe 6, 10 max.
Yeah, I think 10. I think 10's fair. It gives you enough time to get your feet wet.
Uh-huh.
We also need to change up how our political process runs and our campaigning, because so much of campaigning takes up time because it's every 2 years. And I don't want to change that because I do believe you have a choice. But I also think we need to take a look at that, because means you're constantly looking for donations. You're constantly looking for the next buck. And that doesn't really mean that you're paying attention to your constituents.
Right. Well, not in our situation anyway. So, Representative Desjardins had no prior political experience when he decided to run in 2010. Now, the story is he was a physician at that time. I think he still is, but he's run into some difficulties, and we'll talk about them briefly in a second. But his patients were expressing concern about the high cost of health care, so he decided to run for office. Now, I'm a retired nurse and nurse practitioner, and I don't think he's done anything for those patients in 13 years. But I don't think we're going to talk too much about that today. We'll get together again. And really, he defeated incumbent Lincoln Davis, a Democrat, and spent a lot of money and spent a lot of time to get his message to voters. And he won, getting 57% of the vote. Well, he won again in 2012, but in 2014 he was considered at risk to be reelected because he had some marital problems, affairs, problems with giving some pills, and he had at least arranged 2, if not 3 abortions. And you say that, and you talk about that in your stump speech, where I've heard you a couple times. But he won anyway, and he went on to win in 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022 by gradually increasing margins. So it looks like he's pro-gun and apparently pro-violence against women. He threatened to shoot his first wife, and then he kind of terrorized her by playing with the gun. Okay, but the voters in his district seem to be okay with that because I guess it's his conservatism. Why does that history bother you and Democrats so much?
I mean, it's one of those things where when I talk to constituents, they either know the story or they don't. And then you tell them and they're just like, jaw drops to the floor.
Because it's kind of old news.
It's old news, and you would think that it would get more news, but I think that's just a function of the lack of news sources that are local to Tennessee, which we've kind of recovered with the Tennessee Holler, as well as I think that
and the Tennessee Lookout.
Then the Tennessee Lookout, yeah. And then as well as I think that a big part of it is that Democrats don't show up to the polls. They don't show up to primaries. They don't show up. And so it's like right now we're in early voting, and it's a 3-to-1 ratio right now is what we're seeing. Now, that might change with our most recent news, but I do think that that's part of the problem is that we're not as active. I think we've been a little complacent, and we can fix that and with younger, more revitalized candidates. And I think I represent that for the people here. As a working class mom, as someone who wants to see change in Tennessee and the United States, as well as I don't have political experience, but that shouldn't count me out from the ballot.
Right, no, because it didn't count him out, and times have changed in that. I think that what bothers me is just the hypocrisy of it. He believes he is forgiven. He believes his missteps are behind him, and he seems to have refocused his life. He's remarried and has 3 children. And some accounts, people say he's a good guy. I've never actually spoken to him. There's reasons for that too, not just me. But he has no consideration, apparently, for women in difficult circumstances. And I think that's what brings people to decide about abortion. They may be very young. Our U.S. Senate candidate, Gloria Johnson, talks a lot about 14 very young women in Tennessee being, actually forced to carry out the pregnancy because there's very few options. Women that find themselves pregnant may have a decreased level of support or no support, financial difficulties, emotional and psychological issues, and should have just plain freedom over their own bodies. I believe he's a total ban with no exceptions.
I believe that too, especially because he's come out in lots of support for Donald J. Trump, our former president. I also think it's more complicated than that a lot of the narrative gets turned around of people using abortion as, the pill, or, they're just like trying to get away from having, a kid.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time I think it's like 35% are white women, based on Planned Parenthood's numbers, as well as most of those women are married and they've had a birth control fail. I have had a birth control fail, and that's part of the reason I'm running for office, is because of the experience I had. And knowing that now, if I'd had that experience today, my life could be at risk. And I say this all the time on my TikTok. My duty is to my two children that are here. It is not to a pregnancy. I love children so much, but I have two that I have to make sure that I can raise and be there for them, and I don't want to risk that.
Mm-hmm. Conservative Republicans are very unforgiving of others, in general, or within the government, other than themselves and their own party. And I didn't have to go back very far to think examples of that. Hunter Biden was a bad man. He had some problems, and I'm sure there's a big old long history of him and what's happened in his life, but they were just after him. The Republicans in Congress, even saying that Joe Biden was in there, Alejandro Mayorkas, they wanted to impeach him, and that didn't pass. They're after Merrick Garland about some tapes, and then immigrants. But when it's their own team, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Trump's felony counts, anything with the people on his team that have served time, or been jailed or had licenses removed. I mean, you just think of lots. The January 6th insurrectionists, which was just a rowdy group of tourists, and even George Santos. Remember him? He was a New York congressman who made up a whole fake personage about himself, and they generally voted against dismissing him from Congress. I do have to say, and you've probably found this too, Victoria, that it's very difficult to follow the votes in Congress. How much have you been able to study your opponent with all your other responsibilities at this time?
I actually am lucky that I have a really good support system. I have a very supportive father who is loving doing all the research.
He do a lot of it. Okay,
he does a lot
British.
of it. Yes, he's British. So my mother was American. My father is British, or I should say, a United States citizen. And my father is British, and he has remained a green card holder. So immigration, all those things are close to my heart because, we experienced that as children. I sometimes say that I'm an alien in both countries. I'm too American to be British and too British to be American, because there's just so many things of those two cultures. And it is hard to study my opponent because looking at those votes, it's very, very consuming. Yes, that's the word. Yeah, consuming. It's very consuming because you have to go through the vote and you have to find their vote and you have to see if they voted yay or nay. And I remember when I first started, it was right around the TikTok ban was going through, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. This will be perfect for my content. And he didn't vote to ban it. And I was like, oh no, but why? And then I realized that part of that was because of the Ukraine situation, as well as Israel, and he doesn't support Ukraine. So he voted no to stay away from that and not be a part of the people who voted for the TikTok ban. And it was
You think it should be banned?
I don't think it should be banned. I personally love TikTok.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I love it. But he voted to not ban it, which felt like a lose for me because I couldn't be like, oh, this is what he's doing. He doesn't want young people to have freedom of reach, which is what the bill says. Okay. It says that the guy who wrote it, I don't know his name right now, but he said people have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. And I take issue with that.
Okay. Victoria and I both share this interest in looking up politics, and because one thing leads to another and another website, and you just kind of dig, deeper, and we enjoy that. But I know there's a lot of people that don't. And so that's why I think some of the news sources other than your local paper, which nobody gets anymore, and then we called it the echo chamber in my introduction to this podcast, that you just hear what people say and you just buy it, and sometimes the media doesn't really encourage exploration either. They just say, here in this minute we've summarized the TikTok vote or Ukraine, and you're like, okay, got it. And you don't.
Yeah, because I think people do need time to listen to things. I find myself now, I work full time, so I always have something on in the background, whether it be news, whether it be music. I have a playlist for just about everything.
Okay.
And I found that TikTok Lives, there are a couple of creators that I really like because they go over those topics over and over and over again. And it's really helped with my talking points because then I understand what a Republican's going to say to me, and I can counter that with knowledge because they bring lawyers on, they bring analysts on, and they bring real experience in. And that's one of the benefits I found of TikTok is I've been able to find all these voices, lawyers to break things down, medical professionals who can go over a patient's chart and talk about those things. And I think that it's allowed for more knowledge.
Right. Because the internet really hasn't done that, what it was expected to be, to increase our knowledge. So I did, what I could, a general overview of Representative Desjardins' actions, pretty much by looking at his website and a couple of other sources. But he's a Trumper. Okay.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
He supports him 100%, is supported by Donald Trump and also the NRA, the National Rifle Association. So he is Donald Trump, despite the values he identifies with on his website. A few examples: economy and budget. He believes that the U.S. budget must be balanced. He supports a constitutional amendment. So when Mr. Trump accepted the Republican nomination for president, he said that we, his administration, and this is a quote, got the largest tax cut in history, and the tax cuts, spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID, and we were ready to start paying down the debt. Well, none of that is true. Well, there was a large tax cut for the wealthy and corporations. I'm not sure how much. I don't think I felt it. Did you feel it?
I felt it the first year.
Okay.
And then now we're seeing the cut, because the tax cuts for the rich and the corporations stayed in place, whereas for working class people like myself, the last 2 years I've owed $5,000, and I take a lot of money to put aside to that. And yeah, it's a nice little not fun thing at the end of the year.
Well, I travel quite a bit in my retirement, and I see just a lot of huge homes and their second and third homes, and even in Middle Tennessee, certainly in Nashville, people have more money than they know what to do with, and people say, "Well, how did they get all that money?" I said, "Well, I think that this inequality has been going on since the Reagan years, on this theory that there's trickle down. In other words, that if somebody has a lot of money to invest in their company, they're going to hire more people. And if you follow corporations at all, it goes to their board members and it goes to themselves. Anyway, the debt grew considerably and at a faster rate each year under Trump. The annual budget deficit went to $1 trillion in his first year of presidency and totaled $19.8 trillion during Trump's entire term. Now the tax cuts we talked about a minute ago, he wants to increase them and make them permanent. But Representative Desjardins always votes with his crowd. You don't see him standing out. You don't see in votes that have happened.
Well, and the proof of that, a great example, and I hate to bring it back up, is the TikTok one. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene, we all know her. She's very loud, very outspoken. She voted no on the TikTok ban because of money for Israel and money for Ukraine, specifically for Ukraine because they don't support Ukraine.
Okay. So another example is jobs and immigration. Mr. Desjardins wants a wall to protect us from immigrants. He points to their violent acts, their drug and human trafficking, and the competition, foreign labor competition.
And Trump, for years,
lots of inflammatory misinformation about immigration and immigrants. Like, this is a quote again, "The significance of being an American is eroding." Do you feel eroded?
No.
Okay, I don't either. Wow, that's just, look at the claim that immigrants squeeze Americans out of the labor force. They are stealing our jobs. Truth is that unemployment has been less than 4.1% for 30 months. That's most of Biden's term. The number of Americans working of native-born Americans has not really risen, but that's mostly due to retirement not being replaced by immigrants. And there are plenty of help wanted signs, and you hear that occasionally about not being able to get good help or enough help. So they're not really stealing. Have the people that you've talked to, have they noted immigration as a problem?
No. I think that a lot of people, they want a safe border, let's be clear, like they want that. And there was an opportunity to have a bipartisan bill, which was actually more than I would have ever wanted for our border. And Biden's been very, very concrete in his making sure the border is safe. And yet all the MAGA Republicans came together and said they weren't going to vote on the bipartisan.
Because he told them not to.
Trump told them not to, and he didn't. And I think that if you say you want something, then why wouldn't you? And they said that they didn't want to give Biden a win. And I think that is... Ooh.
Selfish.
Very
selfish. Gosh. Politics over people. I'm not sure why we're so worried about it.
It's really interesting because I've come across a live on TikTok where there's an ex-Border Patrol agent, and he talks about all the different things and goes into, detail on that and breaks it down, and he's like, that's not true. He'll call people out. He's like, that's not something that happens. And it's really interesting to hear that and hear what they have to say, just like we can hear from lawyers, and they talk about the laws and they talk about the breakdowns of like why Trump is needs to be why he's in the state that he's in. And
well, and just last word maybe about immigration is it's not under one person. I think Alejandro Mayorkas is the cabinet member for that, but it takes a team. It takes all levels of government. Kamala Harris was sent there to understand the problems. Now they're trying to impeach her. Because she didn't fix it. Congress has to fix it. And Congress had an attempt to take a shot at it. The Republicans let us down. I wonder if, do you feel like Congressional District 4 is highly conservative?
I don't. I do and I don't. As someone who's now become, I went to high school in Lincoln County. I graduated in 2011. And I felt alone a lot of the time. But there were pockets of Democrats. And I think it's not because there aren't Democrats and there aren't people willing, the silent Biden voter, the silent Harris voter. I think that the other side is just very loud. Yeah. And like I said before, when you don't show up to vote in primaries and in elections, that speaks volumes. And then the people who are the loudest and the ones showing up to the polls are the ones making your laws. So I think that that's something to be considered. I don't think we're very conservative. I think there are conservative aspects,
and there are a lot of people that don't like Representative Desjardins. I have not figured out opposition to voting, Democrat. To our representatives in Franklin County, they don't even get new signs. They use the same sign. Every year they're so confident that they're going to win. Some people do like him or are loyal to Representative Desjardins because he's helped them with a problem that required some government access. Well, that's what a congressman is supposed to do. But do they really want someone who will go along with Trump and all his lies as they continue to be uncovered in his troubles, and his rhetoric is more violent or divisive?
You could even watch him in his speech at the RNC. He wants to talk about peace. He wants to talk about all those things. He's clearly reading from a script, and then as you watch him, he slowly moves away from it and goes to his normal talking points, and that's when you see the change, and then you can kind of just see the teleprompter stop.
You've been to visit us in Franklin County twice, and I've heard you speak in Coffee County as well. And we're going to help to get out information and yard signs and palm cards the coming weeks until the election. Tell us how everyone can contact you, read about you, and most importantly, donate.
Yes, donations. I am a grassroots campaign right now. We do have some larger donors, but most of my donations are $25. And I love that. I have something like 1,000 donations, and most of them are $25, and some of them are recurring donations, and I love that. I love that I'm a working class and I'm representing that. So if you want to find me, I'm on Facebook, Victoria for Congress, Instagram, Victoria for Congress, TikTok, Victoria for Congress, as well as Victoria for Tennessee on Twitter or X if you're.
Okay, and when you say Victoria for Congress, it's the 4.
Or not.
The number
4.
Right.
Yes.
And in your Tennessee, it's TN.
TN, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can find me at Victoria for Tennessee.com, and that is the number 4 as well. If you want to see anything more about me, TikTok's got the most information, the most videos on things that I'm passionate about because I've been doing that for 2 years. But you can also find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook. I try to share everything everywhere.
Okay, good.
And of course, if you would love to donate, I would love for you to donate, and I'll write you a handwritten thank you card.
It's very nice.
Yeah, I love my thank you cards.
And they can do that from your sites.
Yeah, they can do that.
And they can do Act Blue.
Act Blue, yes.
Okay.
Act Blue. And
But there's a place somewhere that they could send checks.
yes, it's P.O. Box 366, Fayetteville, Tennessee 37334.
Okay. Some people still like to do checks.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria Broderick. She's running for U.S. Congress in Congressional District 4. My name is Sandy Rice, and despite my experience doing podcasts, I feel like we've run into some glitches here, so I apologize for that, and I'll be better next time.